Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Neon Nerds podcast, where the talk is more definitive than a mullet on Superman. This is your one-stop place for all things 90s comics. We are your hosts. I am Philip McNulty.
I'm Ryan Brady.
And, welcome to the Neon Nerds podcast, where everyone seems to hate the 90s. We're embracing it fully.
We're taking it back. It's ours, and we love it.
That's what we do. Okay, so just to tell you a little bit about ourselves, I'm Phil McNulty. I'm a comic book artist. I worked on Kevin Smith's Smodco cartoon show. I'm currently the artist on William Shatner's comic book series called Man of War. And, I draw anything and everything.
Do I have to follow that up?
Yeah, you have to follow that up.
I'm actually working on a Sulu's comic book series. No, it's hard to follow that up. No, I wish I could. You know, it's really hard to follow that, Phil. You're like, I've achieved all these things. I work with Shatner. And, go ahead, Ryan. I'm like, hey, guys, true story. I make comic books in my room. I write, draw, color, ink them. I'm all self-taught, so I don't have any professional training, but I enjoy it. And,
when did you decide you wanted to make comic books?
My whole life I wanted to make comic books. But when I really got into it was I've been doing it since 2013, so I'm only 2 years into it.
I thought you were doing it longer.
Yeah, no.
Only 2 years?
Well,
Damn.
See what? I would always draw comic books, right? Just pencils, write the storyline, and then I'd put them away. Like, no one's gonna read this because it was just for myself. Mm-hmm. So I have pages and pages in my room of old comic books that I wrote. And it wasn't until 2 years ago when my friend was putting a website together. He was like, put your stuff up here because I know you have comics. So I actually took the time to ink and color one. I put it out there. And then people seemed to like it. So I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll keep doing it. And I liked it. And I finally felt like I was, a comic book artist. So
the fire star was born.
Yes. It's like my origin. It's like I was bitten by my friend. And got
radioactive friend.
My friend was radioactive, and
that's called The Walking Dead.
That's my origin. What's your origin, Phil?
When I was 3, I got a Spider-Man coloring book from my mom. And I'm a twin, and what happened was I ripped out. Like, he's a big Captain America fan, and he didn't have Captain America in the 90s.
No, there's no Captain America.
There was no mention of Captain. He had one video game, which was Captain the Avengers, but what happened was, Spider-Man was the shit back then. Spider-Man was on everything. Yeah. So I got a Spider-Man coloring book. I felt bad that he didn't have one because it was like, if it's not Captain America, I'm not going to get it. So I was 3. I ripped the page out, flipped it over, and I drew my own Spider-Man on the back. And I gave it to my brother and be like, here's Spider-Man's twin. You can color him green. And but then that's always what I wanted to do. I went to college because I went for an art class freshman year of high school. Yeah. And my teacher said that comic books was not art and it was a lowly profession. So I ended up dropping the art class. I'd be like, you're not gonna have me draw comics. And so I stayed in that class for a little bit, and she gave me bad grades because we had to draw still life, and because I was so mad with my nerd rage, I drew Batman and everything. Like, we had to draw a couch in the middle of the room, so I had Batman leaving with that cat, and we had to make these masks for Day of the Dead. And they're like, oh, make your mask. So I literally just took the clay that we had and I made a Batman mask, like a flat Batman mask. She's like, it needs to be 3D. So I put a triangle-like point to make the nose. Yeah. And that was my mask. And she gave me a D for that. And then I dropped that class. But then I went to college. Stockton University now. I always wanted to be a comic book artist. They said, what can we do to make you a comic book artist? And I applied for an ad on Craigslist, and that's how it started.
That's how you got Shatner work.
Yeah, well, how was on Craigslist? The ad was for comic book artists?
So it didn't mention
No. Well, this was even before Shatner. What happened was the company was called RZG Comics.
Okay.
So I checked them up to see what the hell it was, and it was like a calendar website website of these girls in there. I'm like, what is this a smut comic book company? And they're like, no, we just take pictures of these girls and we put them where the characters are. And that was their comics. They would take and they have these weird poses, but they were like, well, we're going to launch our new comic book series called Phaser. So they're like, I'm going to give you a shot. So they put my artwork. He saw my artwork. He's like, well, I just don't want you to be a little insert. I want you to have your own comic. And since you drew the bad guy part, I want you to draw the bad guy part of that comic book series. So it was called the Blue Sultan. Real terrifying. And what happened was later during that time I was drawing it, and then he worked with my editor and writer and creator of all these characters. Worked at Marvel in the 90s for Shatner's Tech War.
Yes, and Tech War.
So he said, I want to start. So he's like, well, let's get a comic book property to launch everything. So he went to William Shatner and said, do you want to start your own comic book line? So he got the rights back from Marvel, since the years have passed, to do the Man of War comic book series. Yeah. So I was working on RZG Comics for 5 years. I graduated in 2010 and then 2005, right when 2005 started, Shatner bought out the comics portion of RCG Comics and was like, this is where we're going to go now. And he's like, I like this artist. So he took my artist and the rest of the guys they got rid of. So that's how I worked on that comic.
I always, when you said Craigslist ad, I always just pictured it was like, come to this warehouse at night, don't tell anyone. And you just walk in, you're like, hello! And then just a door opens, and Shatner walks in you're working for me now, Phil. You're like, oh, Shatner!
He beams up in the little weird area.
It's like Tech War. He just comes out.
But it was during the height of the Craigslist killer, too, which...
So, 50-50. You're either going to get hired by Shatner or killed by Shatner.
Exactly right. And
I had to do it. He kills you and...
Well, I went on job interviews, and...
I feel young.
You are I'm going to live through you. Can you imagine if that was like a Goosebumps story? Shatner, goes into these young people that retell his stories.
Shout out to Goosebumps. You thought this was such a 90s comic podcast. It's 90s everything.
I have a feeling it is.
We're going to get to everything. With the main focus being comics, but we're going to spread out.
Of course.
Because in the 90s, I feel like no matter what it was, take X-Men, for example. X-Men had a big comeback in the 90s, and it spread. So it spread to cartoons. The cartoon had video games, and then you've got Pizza Hut cups.
Pizza Hut cups because they had the promo, and the X-Men went to the Pizza Hut. They went to Crunch and Munch. Yeah, you remember Crunch and Munch boxes? Because back in the day, they had you could only get their exclusive X-Men trading cards through Crunch and Munch, and all I wanted was Gambit. That's the only card I wanted was the Gambit card, because it was at the time it was Jim Lee artwork. I didn't know Jim Lee at the time. So what happened was all right, I really like how this Gambit's drawn. I want it. So my dad came back and he had the Crunch and Munch box, and I opened up the box and it was Cable. I was like, oh, this guy's pretty neat, but it's not Gambit. Yeah. The next day, my dad got another box of Crunch and Munch. Again, it was Cable. The next day he comes back from work, third box of Crunch and Munch. I think you know where this is going.
You ate a box a day?
I ate a box a day because my mom is a sweetheart. I love my mom. And she was like, oh yeah, just get on the box. But there's a point where we had these boxes full of Crunch and Munch that were not eaten because I'd open it up, I'd see Cable and be like, it's not Gambit. And so my mom's like, well, you're going to have to start eating this Crunch and Munch. So I would tear through boxes of Crunch and Munch just to get it. And when I got that Gambit card, it was the best.
Did you ever eat Crunch and Munch again?
I still do eat Crunch.
I still do.
Well, very rarely. My tolerance is not where it used to be for it. But the memories alone of saying, you know what? I got all my X-Men fandom in this box of Crunch and Munch. Yeah. It's totally worth to go back and get Crunch and Munch. Do you have anything? Is it
food related like that?
Food related like that?
Do you remember when the Spider-Man cartoon was on the fruit roll-ups?
Yes.
The actual ad in the comic book was a 2-page ad for fruit roll-up. Yeah, because Spider-Man was on the one side, and he was flipping his web and onto like a fruit roll-up on the other side of the page. So for me, that was like, that was it.
You had to get that.
Yeah, but it wasn't like yours where it was like a collectible. There wasn't like a prize. The prize was the fruit roll-up.
Well, that was the thing. They had the High C. High C had the X-Men. Fruit, the fruit boxes, the fruit juice boxes.
Yeah.
And their cards were the actual back of the boxes.
Oh, so you
had to collect the High C boxes. Like you drink them, and then you just have these empty, nasty boxes of High C. And eventually, it was like, I'm just gonna get rid of these because they're dried up. And like, what are you gonna do with High C? But that's what Crunch and Munch excelled at. And Pizza Hut, they're like, you know what? We're not gonna put it on boxes or anything. We're gonna give you the separate items.
Separate cup.
Do you think someone has the fruit roll-up Spider-Man like laminated?
I hope someone does. I hope someone loves Spider-Man that much to just have it still. Like, I still have it. I collected all of them.
The worst thing was fruit roll-ups are such a bitch to open up.
Yeah.
Like even today.
You tear Doc Ock. You'd be like, you just rip them.
Because even fruit roll-ups today, you can't fully roll them out because they're like pinched at the end.
Yeah.
So Doc Ock's face would be cut off because it was pinched off at the end, and you're like, God damn it. Yeah.
But for collectibles that aren't comic books, for me in the 90s, it was all about action figures.
No.
Like, specifically, Batman Animated Series and the Spider-Man, the cartoon. Because they both had great rogues gallery. I remember going to KB Toys, which doesn't really exist anymore.
No, there is no more KB Toys anymore.
But listen up, people, especially the millennials.
Yeah, they don't...
2 for $5, 3 for $10. Those deals were incredible.
The KB Toys was great because it was like the Toys R Us for people who could afford toys.
Yeah.
Because I remember Toys R Us, even back in the day, like their action figures have always kind of been. They were always cheap. They're cheap. They were a lot cheaper than now, but they were. Yeah. But they never had any deals. Toys R Us never had any deals.
No.
But you're like, especially with Batman and Spider-Man and the X-Men, like X-Men roster was huge.
Yeah.
The Batman villains were huge, and the Spider-Man villains are huge. So you're gonna get. So you have to think about Doc Ock, Mysterio, Carnage, Venom, Kraven, Chameleon. Right, that's just 6. Right, and that's not even the entire Sinister Six.
Yeah, I remember specifically one time I came home and I had like some of the rarest. Well, I mean rare in terms of I had seen them at my Toys R Us. Mm-hmm. I came home with Scorpion, Shocker, Rhino, Vulture, and then the other guys. I had Kraven and Venom. My brother had Carnage. I always wanted Carnage. Oh, Hobgoblin, Green Goblin. We're getting out of ourselves.
Real quick side note. Do you prefer Hobgoblin or Green Goblin?
I gotta say Hobgoblin.
Hobgoblin. Because they introduced him first in the animated series. And now looking back on it, I don't understand why they did that. Because Green Goblin, because they skipped over Gwen Stacy. So I guess we don't need. They still made it like Osborn Tech.
Yeah.
But it was stolen by the guy who was Hobgoblin.
Yeah.
And then that's how they introduced
But you also did, it was also Mark Hamill voicing Hobgoblin. So for me, it was like, it's Joker,
It's the Joker for the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, so it was great. And I had Lizard too, because I remember he was the first episode. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man. What a great thing.
Because they don't make action figures that well spread anymore. Now because Marvel doesn't have the film rights to. Well, they just got half of the Spider-Man rights back.
What Amazing Spider-Man they have?
They have the Spider-Man movie rights back. They bought half of it back, but they don't have the X-Men rights.
Yeah, you're right.
So there's no X-Men figures out.
No.
So you're stuck with the same Captain America 3 times over, Iron Man 4 times over, Thor 2 times over, and you're like, There's more back then. You had every figure you could imagine.
That was the great thing about back in the 90s, because no one was there to say like, no one's gonna buy Shocker.
Yeah.
Nobody was there to say no. It was like, just make Shocker, make everybody. Like I have like the like animated series. I have a penguin who he can't really do too much.
No, he had the giant belly. That's what was great about that.
He
figure.
comes with a cloth coat. It's like I'm not gonna do with this. There's so many figures from that series. But there was no one to say like, don't make that figure. No one's gonna buy that. And every cartoon had its own toy line.
It had it, and they had the different. They had the best part about it was they weren't like standard figures. Like today, you get standard figures. They're just in the box and there's nothing. Like back then, you had light up figures. You had Power Kick and Action Kick ones. You had one of the greatest toys ever created was the Iceman action figure. Where
are we talking about the one where you freeze his feet into the board?
Okay, so backstory: the Iceman action figure you put him in the freezer and he changes colors because he's Iceman, and they're like, oh, well, here's a cool thing for kids. Yeah. So I thought you could put every figure in the freezer. I said this is going to be great. So I would put action figures in the freezer. And my mom would open it up and be like, what the hell are these? And it got to a point where I said, well, this isn't what Iceman would do. Iceman would put them in blocks of ice. So I would get the little Dixie and Solo cups, but not the plastic one, the paper ones, where I would fill them up with water, and then I would stick an action figure in the cup of water and freeze it to make it thematic. Like ice, like now my frozen Iceman froze the figures in these blocks of ice, and you had to use the paper ones so you could peel off. Yeah. So you could see their feet through the ice.
Yeah, that's pretty hardcore. You played for real back then.
Oh, I used to record myself playing with my action figures to make my own little storylines and cartoons, and I would go to Burger King to get Spider-Man. Yeah. Him and Venom were in these race cars, like these they were these cars, but they were shaped like spiders.
Like a Happy Meal?
They were Happy Meal toys. And I said, how cool would it be to have Spider-Man and Venom in a car chase? So there was a car chase in my action figures showcase theater where swinging wasn't enough for Spidey and Venom. They had to take it on the roads. It was Fast and Furious age 6.
Oh, that's awesome. See, that's before smartphones. Yeah, that's just like you just played like this. That's all you had to do all day.
You had to use your imagination, and you had to take basically these gigantic cameras because they were basically the size of you, and you had to set them up, and you could only get one shot. So I would have it on the table, and I would turn it. Because in order to do a different scene, I had to turn the camera so it's like, okay, now we're facing the kitchen, now we're facing the dining room. And one time I left the camera rolling. Yeah. And if you hear like my parents fighting in the background because and this is just a few years ago we discovered this because now VHSs they're extinct. Yeah. So now you can get your VHS and put it on DVD, and now it's put it straight to the computer. So we're looking through them. And I'm filming the Ghostbusters because they had the Ghostbusters cartoon series back then. And did you have the playset house?
We had it, but it was like a lot of it was like like stripped, like it was bare. Like my brothers had already gotten to it by the time it came down to me.
No, like my dad put it together because it had like the red disc thing from the top. Yeah. They would spin down, so it was like they were coming down the pole. Yeah. So I was filming that scene. Right, and what happens is I heard my parents yelling, so apparently I moved the camera a bit because I guess my mind at the time was like, oh no, I'm getting yelled at for using the camera. But you hear so I turn it, and it looks like I hid the camera behind a bag of potato chips, and you just see Jim Herr's face staring at the lens, and you hear my dad yelling because my sister like tripped and almost at the fireplace and almost like broke the glass everywhere. So my dad's like, Patty, what happened? Right? And so that was the one of the times like I left that open. So I made even more memories with the...
It's like a Shyamalan twist at the end of that. You're like trying to watch the Ghostbusters and Jim Hur comes out and yells at Patty.
It was all Jim Hur's doing.
No, I never recorded myself playing, but I'd always try to make it as realistic as possible. So there was one time I was playing and Deadpool was fighting Batman. And I made Deadpool tie Batman up with like this stuff I found, and it was like this really sticky, like tape, like tape Batman all up.
Oh no!
And then like I couldn't get it off him, and then I finally got the tape off him, but then the adhesive was still all over him. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, I don't know what to do. But you ever break your figure while you're playing?
Yes.
And so
I broke the figure. I broke more than anything, and I broke this figure 4 times. And God bless my parents, because my dad would come home Fridays, and he'd bring us a toy from action figures. Now back then. My mom's a stay-at-home mom, and my dad, computers were just starting.
Yeah.
So, and he was learning computers. So my dad didn't make that much money. So it was always great to have a toy on Fridays. And this kid, you don't know. Yeah. Well, the X-Men. Yeah. The Forge. He had Forge from the X-Men. Forge from the X-Men. If you don't know, Forge is a character from the X-Men that was really popular in the 90s. He led the group called X Factor. He has this metal leg, and they show all like the filaments and everything.
Yeah, he's got the translucent leg and the quick draw.
Exactly. So the figure had the translucent leg, and they just had a piece of paper that showed like that was just like stuck in there to show like, oh look, he's got a metal leg.
Yeah.
So the thing was, with that translucent leg, they didn't know how to articulate that, so his leg was permanently stuck. It couldn't move. So only his right leg could move. His left leg was stuck, and the knee couldn't bend because they had to keep that clear plastic. But even though they showed the points of articulation, and I said, son of a bitch, Forge is going to kick somebody's ass, and he's going to use that metal leg to do it. But the thing is, as soon as you bend that knee, that leg would break, and the plastic would crack into 3 pieces, and the paper would fall out. And you're like, and so the next week, my dad got me a Forge figure, and I said, all right, Forge, this is take 2. You're not gonna let Omega Red stop you. You're gonna get this down right now. You're gonna kick him right in the gut. And I went for the kick, and his leg broke. And ultimately, I had to wait until Christmas for another Forge figure, where that same day, Christmas, he was going to exact revenge on Omega Red. He's been waiting since August.
Oh, man.
They got him.
That's determination, man. That Forge is not going to quit.
And the final Forge that I ever broke was in the freezer, because the translucent plastic couldn't hold up an Iceman's the Dixie cup, and the plastic like broke and shattered.
Oh man, I always play my Spider-Man like a lot, and then I wore his arm down. So one day I was playing and his arm just snapped at the elbow. And, like, you can't play with a one-armed Spider-Man because how's he going to thwip? So,
was it the one that had the string through the arm?
No, I had that one. I actually cut the string. Like, I regret it, but I was like, this is stupid. Because his arms were perpetually out. That was the first...
Only his waist could move.
That was the first figure they made for that cartoon. And I was like, how's he going to throw a punch? So then it was a parachute Spider-Man. That was the one I broke his arm off of. So to solve that, my brother bought me the 6-arm Spider-Man, which, it's useful in case you lose an arm, but you're like, this isn't Spider-Man, this is 6-arm Spider-Man.
My brother was so freaked out from that 6-arm Spider-Man figure that he thought if he touched it, he was going to grow 6 arms. So I would tease him, and I would throw it at him, and he'd run, because there are certain figures that he would play with that I couldn't play with, because because Spider-Man, that 90s cartoon series, Venom was his arch enemy, and Venom was, the best episodes had Venom in it.
Yeah.
So my brother was like, well, Phil's got the market on Spider-Man, I'll get the market on Venom. So when Action Figure Theater needed Venom, I would use the 6-armed Spidey to kind of detract him. But the very first Venom figure that they came out with, do you remember this? They had the ooze. Like you could put the green slime in his chest and like push out. Well, what happened was my brother and I were playing with the figures, and I'm like, he needs the green ooze. He's gonna, Venom was all about eating brains. Yeah. I was like, Venom needs the green ooze. And as soon as I opened it up, I spilled that ooze on the carpet. And we tried desperately, because once that ooze, I don't know, I'll never know what the ooze was made of, but it had the biggest, it had a stain on the carpet, and it dried out the carpet too, so it was like rough. You'd see like the soft patches around it, except for this little like spot.
Yeah, it was not a good idea to sell that.
Can you imagine, like, because now on all action figures they have pieces for kids for like 3 and under. We didn't have, back in the 90s it was anything and everything goes, and
because
choking hazards.
The Spider-Man figures used to come with a pin.
Yes.
A little pin.
Yes.
And I could swallow this right now, like right away.
But we have to think that we were smarter not to. Do you think it was the mind of the collect? Do you still have your pins?
No, maybe in an old toy box, but I didn't set out to collect them.
I have my pins.
You still
have them with the little plastic clips. Yeah. Some of them don't have the other white plastic on the end of it, because that snapped off because I wanted to look cool in school, so I tried to put them on to be like, hey guys, look at the Spider-Man pin.
Yeah, you like Mysterio?
But the thing was, we'll bring this back in the 90s, comics aren't what they were today. They weren't popular. They weren't everywhere.
Oh no, yeah.
Were you ever picked on or teased for your love of comics?
I had a Batman backpack and a Batman, so they would always make fun of me because Batman was corny at the time. Because this is back, Batman Forever.
Batman Forever.
Yeah.
The seal. To get the most popular thing to come from Batman Forever was Kissed by a Rose from Seal.
Yeah.
That was the best thing to come. Do you remember that music video?
Oh yeah, Seal in front of the bat signal, shirt flowing.
That was when he's like, my power, my pleasure, my pain, and then you saw the Batmobile like break through shit. And you're like, oh, Seal's a motherfucking badass.
Yeah, we could devote a whole episode to how different it is now. Like, I went to Hot Topic today, and I'm like, you know what? You don't know how it was. Like, as popular today as the animated series is, everybody's like, oh, it was so great. Back in the day, like, you were corny for watching it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what are you doing with that Batman backpack? Because it was pretty cool. The back of the backpack was Batman from the waist up. Mm-hmm. So his utility belt, you could zipper it and put your pencils in there. Awesome. Yeah, it was awesome.
That's awesome. Was it like, so you would like wear the backpack reverse, so his chest, like your chest,
I could have been. Yeah, but it wasn't cool to like those kind of things. And yeah, in comics wasn't as popular as they are now.
No,
nobody was really. I mean, if people were reading them, it was kind of like the DL.
That's the thing. I never hid from anybody.
Yeah.
Like I was always the comic book guy, and still I'm the comic book guy.
Yeah.
Like when I was doing Smod Tunes for Kevin Smith, they're like, I got that job through a contest, and it was draw Batman versus Darth Vader in a 2-minute clip, and so my 2-minute clips was have Batman versus Darth Vader in a game of Guess Who, and so sitting down, getting the best lines and everything, like having to write it. My brother helped me write it, and we were like, this is gonna be great. And I got the job because Kevin Smith was like, that guy draws a badass Batman. Let's give him the job. So I got the job from drawing a badass Batman. So I mean that's kind of, but back then, like if you weren't really drawing like that's I would draw Batman. That's how I spent my recess, like being being the guy who drew comics, but they said, oh, Phil's, so during their monsoons, they're like, Phil's the comic book guy.
Yeah.
So he's going to do so any superhero thing that we do, we want Phil to draw it and animate it. So that's always, but even back then, it's like, in the 90s, I spent my recess, I wasn't playing knockout on the basketball court.
Yeah.
My body's not fit for sports.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be out there,
no,
ever.
No.
So I sat at the lunch table with my friend Jarrell Crawford. I would draw Spider-Man, and he would draw Spawn. And that's what we did during recess.
Yeah.
And I remember people tried to give me shit for liking Spider-Man because I would come in with, like, X-Men t-shirts, Spider-Man t-shirts, Batman t-shirts. And they tried to give you shit but until they saw me drawing it, then they're kind of like, hey, he can draw it. That's what kind of, I feel like, saved me, because freshman year of high school, I was in my Spanish class, and I saw this one big dude, and he saw me with my glasses, and I came in with my Gambit t-shirt. First day of high school, I was like, Gambit's gotta make it. Every year, I made it a point. Every first day of school, I wore my Gambit t-shirt. Because I didn't know anybody, because from elementary school to upper middle school, we had to change schools.
Yeah.
And then from upper middle school to middle school, lower middle school to the upper middle school, you had to change. You had to go to another one. So I went and I moved my elementary school. So I went from Parkway to Larchmont to Hartford to Harrington, and then finally Lenape. And I made sure every first day of school, every year, I wore a Gambit t-shirt, because I didn't know anybody there, and if I could find someone who was like Gambit, and like, especially when you're young, because that series debuted when I was 5, so I didn't like going to school because like, oh my god, they're taking me away from my home. I don't think I ever know it's being here. I wanted to see if I could find someone who liked Gambit, and then we could talk about the X-Men.
Yeah.
And then B, you find out who the people to stay away from if they look at you weird because you have a guy wearing bright pink on your shirt.
Yeah.
Freshman year of high school, I wore my Gambit shirt, and this big dude who was like, oh my god, first year of high school, I'm wearing I wore grandpa glasses.
Yeah.
Like, they were huge. And so when I went in there, I'm like, this guy's gonna beat me up. This guy's gonna do something. This is gonna be hell. He's gonna pick on me in Spanish. Freshman year in Spanish, I'm in for it. He comes up to me, he's like, Gambit, right? I'm like, yeah, he's my favorite character. I draw him anytime I can. He's like, you draw Gambit? I said, yeah. And I was like, so now I went immediately from this guy's gonna beat me up to I'm gonna have to pay off this guy not to beat me up by talking about Gambit, which I do anyway.
Yeah.
He's like, you draw me Gambit, I'll give you $5, right? And I was like, oh sure. When you want to, he's like, shh. Keep on the download. So he gave me. So I did a Gambit drawing for $5, and then he wanted a big, and then he was moving, like, and you could tell like he was moved by moving. I mean, they were putting him to like a school for like the bad kids. Yeah. Right. And before he was leaving, he's like, "Yo, I got $20 in my pocket. You get a giant poster and you draw me Gambit. I'll give you $20 before I go. You better bet your ass." And I spent all weekend drawing that Gambit, like on one of those big ass construction papers that you get at CVS for book reports and stuff. And he gave me $20 for that Gambit. So back then, even in high school, back then, comic books were not popular.
It was like underground.
It was underground, yeah.
I went to a Catholic school until 8th grade, and then that's when I had my Batman backpack and stuff, so I kind of got picked on. Then they kind of got used to it because you stay with the same group through the entire school. Yeah. So I was just like, oh, that's Ryan, he's the geeky kid. But so they accepted me, but I wasn't like, I wasn't the sex symbol. So we hit puberty.
You weren't in any gangs.
Yeah, when we hit puberty in 6th grade, I wasn't at the top of the food chain, but I was drawing comics back then, but I couldn't really draw. Really, I mean, I drew, but I wasn't as good. So my character was just like a cartoon skull with arms and legs. And I had him just like, he's fighting like this mutant bear with all these teeth and stuff, and he's fighting this robot. And I always tried to make it like really exciting and like the 90s comics were. And then my mom found them, and they weren't like gory or vulgar or anything, but she was like,
he's rebelling.
She was really worried about me, specifically the school finding these pictures of like a skull fighting evil. So she was like, don't show these to anybody.
Do not show these to anybody.
Like, you're gonna have to go to like psychiatric counseling if they find these. I was like, I'm just drawing comics, Mom.
Don't you know Ghost Rider? He is a flaming skull.
I'm just drawing comics, Mom. So.
No, my dad collected comic books before I was born. So I was born in.
Oh, you were born in.
I was destined to be a geek.
You have an heir. You're the heir to
be a nerd and the Neon Nerds. But when I was born, he sold a lot of his comics before I was born, and he loved the X-Men.
Yeah.
He has all the way up to issue. He has Uncanny X-Men. He had Uncanny X-Men 265. Gambit debuted Uncanny X-Men 266. He stopped right before he stopped. And the book came out in August. So he stopped collecting, I guess, in July of 1990.
Yeah.
Before it came out. So, and all the other ones he sold. So, but my dad was kind of like, my dad was like, well, he always gravitate towards superheroes. We're just gonna feed into it. I mean, and we were blessed because we had the cartoon. Like when we hit 5, like when you know what you're gonna like and what you're not.
It was there for you.
Yeah, it was like
they welcomed you with open arms.
The day that I'll never forget, the day that I saw the X-Men animated series, like when it debuted. Do you remember seeing it debut? Or
I don't remember if I just remember, because the mall.
It was the mall. Yeah, okay. So the very first episode of X-Men the Animated Series was Night of the Sentinels.
Yeah.
And it's the best. And that's what Pizza Hut did. Because Pizza Hut gave the video, had it on VHS, a few months later when they realized that this show was picking up. But I'll never forget, because my dad was like, that they potty trained me. My parents potty trained me because they're like, when I was learning, they're like, he likes Spider-Man. If you don't wear Spider-Man underwear, you're not gonna. Well, now 20 some odd years later, still wearing Spider-Man boxers. But during that day, my dad was like, he likes Spider-Man. He likes Batman. My dad didn't have much X-Men stuff.
Yeah.
My dad loved the X-Men when he collected it because his 2 favorite characters were Batman and Wolverine.
Okay.
And he still loved Batman and Wolverine. So that Saturday morning, I was so excited because my dad was like, Spider-Man's gonna have his own cartoon, and Batman's gonna have his own cartoon, and the X-Men's gonna be on too. I remember watching Batman first, and then Spider-Man, and then the final cartoon of the morning was the debut of X-Men because it was the hour. It was Night of the Sentinels Part 1 and Night of the Sentinels Part 2. And then that's kind of what started it all for me to pursue a career in comics was X-Men, the animated series, and Night of the Sentinels. Because what happened was, when I watched it, first of all, had the best theme song.
Still does.
In all, you don't understand.
I have that on my iPod. I just drive around with it.
My ringtone is the X-Men animated theme, So it had the guitar solo in there, all of them had it except for the Batman, which had the Danny Elfman 1989, which is iconic. Yeah. But when you're talking about 5 years old, it's in the 90s. There was nothing greeting you more than a guitar solo in a Saturday morning cartoon. And X-Men had the opening bass of the and you're like, so even at 5 years old, I knew this. It's special right here. Yeah. I remember as a kid sitting at this brown table with my dad, right, and we were sitting watching it, and So the X-Men started, and the way they introduced it is you see right off the bat you see Jubilee, who's like the star of this, who was the star of that first episode to get you into it.
Yeah.
You know, because it was supposed to be like, oh, you two are a teenager, and you two are watching this.
She's Luke in the cantina. She's your guy.
She is supposed to be you in this world.
Yeah.
And then they go to the mall, and so I'm loving this cartoon.
Yeah.
And then I see this guy, bright pink, a headpiece that only his hair is sticking out from the top, that defies gravity, and this trench coat. And he walks over to this desk, and like the woman's infatuated with him. And he's like, and he buys all these cards, and you don't know why, you don't know what for, you don't know why he has these cards. You just, even in the beginning, you really didn't know what he was, because in the beginning when they introduced him, you see him throw something, but you don't know what it is. And he's like, and then he flirts and he hits on the girl. Think about it. It was intended for our age group. He's like, he's like, I like solitaire, okay? I got someone to play with. And they're like, I don't know what this guy's talking about, but he's smooth as hell. And then, so I was like, this guy, he's pretty damn cool. And then the next time you see him, is they're still in the mall. A Sentinel's chasing Jubilee. He breaks through the mall. He fires at Jubilee. The top of the floor breaks, and there's this guy in pink again. And he catches her, and he's like, "Where you going?" Like all fucking chill and relax. Like, forget that this giant robot's chasing her down. He's like, "Where you going, Petit?" Right? And so then the Sentinel's like, he's like, apprehend this mutant, and he goes, apprehend this, and he pulls out the playing cards, and he fires them at this Sentinel, just like one-handed, just like in this badass pose, and then she goes, how'd you do that? And he said, with style. And from that moment on, from the title credits, and when I saw that character named Gambit, I said, what I want to do for the rest of my life is draw this character. Yeah. And that's what I want to do. Because you know of comic books, you know he's in the comics, but when I saw that cartoon, like, that was my first introduction to Gambit, first real introduction to X-Men.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to pursue a career in this. And so that was in Saturday morning cartoons, they don't have that.
No, yeah. It was like a gateway. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing for, because I remember watching Batman, and for me, Batman is like my X-Men as far as cartoons go. I mean, you like Batman too.
I like Batman, but the X-Men is my X-Men is
like I enjoy X-Men too, but Batman is like mine, and I guess Spider-Man we both enjoy. Yeah. But I remember specifically the Batman cartoon because the iconic beginning. You said the Danny Elfman music, but it's like it's very like very dark, and they're like these guys are blowing up. They blow up a bank, like
oh yes,
and but same both the Batman first episode and the Spider-Man first episode, I was like, I think even at that time, if not Spider-Man, at least Batman, I knew his origin, and I was like, oh, this first episode is going to be his origin. We're going to see his. Nope. Neither of those episodes dealt with origins, which I thought was awesome because first episode of Batman is the Man-Bat episode.
Yes, that's
which
right.
Is terrifying.
Holy crap.
As a child, because they're in a blimp, they're in a police blimp, and they're like, oh, there's a bat creature, and then Man-Bat, and you're like, holy crap. Spider-Man, same thing. First episode, the Lizard.
How ballsy was it to start out an episode with Man-Bat? And granted, in Spider-Man's comic book history, the Lizard is he's his first villain, I think, because they introduced it with like Doc Connors and everything. So the Lizard is one of the very first, if not the first.
He's pretty classic
villain.
But Man-Bat
is
like what 70s, 80s.
Yeah, you think about the Bat, you got Joker, Riddler, Penguin, Catwoman. Yeah. Right. Up until that point in the 90s, there was no. I was about to say Harley Quinn, but there was no Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn was created specifically in that
for that
cartoon series, and but to think they started with Man-Bat.
Yeah, and that's like just seeing like, Man-Bat's awesome. Like just terrifying. Go back and watch those episodes.
See, okay. To go back into the origin of how Ryan and I met.
Let's get to that.
Yeah, here we go. We went so off topic.
I know, but it's so easy for us to talk about cartoons.
So what happens is we were at the comic station in Haddon Heights. We're gonna give a shout out to them. They are one of the best, if not the best, comic book store in New Jersey. They have comics, toys, everything.
I agree.
And they always let the local artists come in and they'll sell their work. And free comic book day, they always get the local artists and we'll sell our artwork, which is nice because people come in for the free comic books. And then they see us in the backlog going to the register.
Yeah.
And Scott allows us to sell our artwork. So last year's free comic book day was the first time Ryan and I met.
Oh, can I tell you my half of it?
Yeah.
All right. So Scott invited me to it, and I was like, sure, I'll go. And I saw who else was going to be there, right? And I see Phil McNulty. And I've heard of the legend of Phil McNulty, right? And I'm like, oh man, right? So I look up his stuff, and I'm like, oh, maybe he's not like, great. And he's great, right? I look at your stuff, I'm like, oh, he's amazing. And then I'm worried because I'm like self-taught, I'm not as good, and I have a lot of doubt. So I'm like, he's going to put me next to Phil, and then I'm going to feel like shit, right? So I bought myself this notebook, right? I bought myself a little notepad. Has a kitten on it, right? And it says, don't let anyone dull your sparkle. And that like made me feel better. I was like, yeah, Phil might be good, but I'm good too my own way, right?
Yeah.
So I go, and they put me next to Phil. I'm like, God damn it. And Phil is doing like, he's just selling stuff. Like his prints are amazing. You have to look at animatedphil.com.
It's let's do a little, this is our podcast now. We're doing a little self promotion.
Well, I just wanted to look up Phil's stuff.
My stuff is, you can find me on animatedphil.weebly.com. You just click on my illustrations. You can see all the prints that I do and sell, and the sketch covers that I'm commissioned to do. And or you can go to Facebook.com/animatedbyphil or Instagram @animatedphil. So
yeah, but so I'm like looking over, trying to look at your stuff, and like all of it's amazing, and I'm like, crap. But and then if people are like coming in just for you, like, oh, I already got the Hulk and Daredevil, I need to get Flash,
which I've never had before.
Oh, really? You never had that before?
That was the first.
You know, that made me feel. I'm like, God damn it, this guy's got repeat customers. People like know him by name, like coming in looking for him, and people are coming over to me, and they're like, "What's your book?" And I'm like, "Oh, I just do it myself." And they're like, "Oh, I thought you were giving out free books or something." And I wasn't doing so hot, but I was listening to you talk about, I don't even remember what you were talking about, but I remember I was like, oh, and we started talking about just everything.
About mainly, see, what happened was, to go back, see, when we first met, I was there, so I saw Ryan come in, and now I heard of Ryan because he does Camden Comics, The Bolt, which I've heard The Bolt, I've seen The Bolt around, so I was like, okay, this is gonna be cool, we're gonna be next to each other, but I thought, because I knew Scott, because when I got in there, Scott was like, we're going to put Ryan next to you, which I thought, okay, this is cool, right? Yeah, my head was, so we were sitting there, and we really didn't say much to each other in the beginning.
Because at that point I was jealous of you. So I was like, God damn, Phil, why'd you put me there? I was looking at my kitten like really hard, like, he's not going to dull my sparkle. It was awesome Gambit prints.
And we were sitting there and we were talking, and then we had this 9-year-old kid like try to one up us on comic books, and
that was it.
And he was like, who do you think would win, Doomsday or the Hulk, right? And the thing is, he didn't know that we lived the 90s.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, Doomsday was introduced. We were the first audience ever to Doomsday, and that's where the kind of intro came in with as definitive as Superman's mullet, because after Doomsday, Superman rocked a mullet
for a long while.
Wait until like the late 90s, for a good 7 years. I had to think for 7 to 8 years. So this kid was like, who would win, Hulk or Doomsday? And we were saying, well, Doomsday went toe-to-toe with Superman because he was under the impression of that Doomsday killed Superman.
Right.
And then Ryan interjected and said, well, little 9-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, I don't know who you are. Secondly, he did not kill Superman. He just severely injured him. And when they buried him, he was like a plant. And he was in a healing coma.
Yeah, healing coma.
And I turned and I said, I think this guy's gonna be my friend. Like I didn't have, and I wore a Gambit shirt that first day. It's like I'm back in school. Someone knows what the hell a healing coma is.
Yeah.
Which I thought, I looked at him and I just like down in my head like yeah.
And at that point when you looked me in the eyes, my heart grew 3 times that big. Like I was like, he knows about the healing coma. Maybe he's pretty cool.
It was like the Grinch.
Yeah, it was like that was a turning point for me.
So this little kid tried to school us on Doomsday, and we just sent the schooling right back.
I remember we said he didn't kill him. He went into healing coma. We also said Superman killed Doomsday, and he also beat Hulk too.
He beat Hulk
in Marvel vs. DC.
In Marvel vs. DC, and he was not buying that Superman. He was not buying that Doomsday could be the Hulk, because we were talking about by the properties. If Superman can beat Doomsday, and Superman can beat the Hulk, right? If Superman and Doomsday can go toe to toe to the point where Doomsday puts him in a healing coma, Hulk doesn't have a healing coma, and when the Hulk gets beat up too much, he turned into Bruce Banner, and that's when Spike Knuckles Doomsday just ends it right there. He was not having any of it, and then so kind of us, schooling this 9-year-old got us into talking about the reign of the Superman, when Superman was dead, and he was 6 feet under in the coma that nobody knew of. We were talking about Steel and
Superboy, Cyborg Superman, and the Hunter Superman, Eradicator.
And which funny, Eradicator has the face thing of Gambit because Gambit was getting so popular with that head, with that head sock. That's why Eradicator Superman has the Gambit head sock. But during that time, and that's when we started talking about about how comics today aren't really. I mean, comics today are good, but if you want classic, definitive stories that are so underappreciated,
there's definitely something lost, I think, in today's comic books.
Exactly. You could say it was a stunt to kill Superman. You could say, it was a marketing ploy, which A, it was, and B, it was. Because they had the death of Superman in the black bags.
I remember. That was like right when I was a kid, too.
And my dad came home with that, and I was like, Superman! Right, so I opened it up, right? And it's you
get the poster, though.
You got the poster.
We had that hanging up, and we used to play, like, how many people can you name? Mm-hmm. But once you got to, like, the top of the poster, I don't know. And then they had the white bags for when Superman came back, right? But people kind of lost in that story is Superman died, right? Yeah. But he didn't really die. He was in a healing coma. That is something a healing coma is so creative in the fact that that's some good writing.
They put him under, and that's why it took him so long to come back, was because Superman gets his power from the sun of, from the yellow sun. So, and the fact that he was buried underneath it, he was like, Ryan said, he was like a plant. Yeah. And that's when I was like, oh my God, this guy and I are going to be friends, because he had to soak in the sun for
months and months,
and came back. But Lost in that was Lost in that was that creative story, and Reign of the Superman, where it was saying, you know what, with Superman gone, it's going to inspire others to pick up the Superman mantle. It was kind of that story of everyone can be a Superman in their own right. Right. They introduced Steel, who has no powers. He created his suit of armor, and he became Steel, and that was his version. Superboy said, you know what, I can be I can be Superman.
Well, he was a clone.
He was a clone of
Superman and Lex Luthor.
Of Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
And this was his time saying, I'm not going to let the Lex Luthor part of me ruin me.
Yeah.
I'm going to be as good as Superman can be. And he had that awesome leather jacket.
One of the favorite costumes of the 90s.
No, by far and away is that leather.
I think as far as DC goes, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And I also like the Nightfall Azrael Batman, the blue armor one.
I had that action figure.
That was rad. So during the 90s, we were introduced to some of the most creative stories that aren't like, okay, for instance, in 2000 one of the most critically acclaimed X-Men run is Grant Morrison's
Ultimate
is just X-Men. He wrote new X-Men, and he put them in these non-leather jackets. He put them in like these varsity jackets and yellow and
weird leather pants.
He made White Queen a member of the team, and I was like, now X-Men has a history of making villains become part of the team, but is someone like the White Queen, who was so villainous at the time, like, I mean, at least Magneto had his agenda. It was just a different way of going about it with Xavier. So you can buy Magneto being part of that. But here's the thing. Grant Morrison wrote an entire arc and introduced this character named Zorn. And he's like, and the big reveal after reading a year, see, good or bad, no matter what, I'm going to read the X-Men. And at this time, back when the 2000 hit, Marvel was coming back from going bankrupt. So anything 90s, they didn't want. So my favorite character of all time, Gambit, was kind of pushed aside. Yeah. And they said, well, we're going to bring it back. We're going to bring Beast. We're going to bring Beast.
Is this when they turned Beast into like a cat man?
Yes, Beast was a cat man. He looks like Grumpy Cat. Have you ever seen Beast? He was Grumpy Cat, which I've, full credit, shout out goes to my girlfriend Heather, who loves the X-Men as much as I do. Yeah. And we were discussing Beast, Catman Beast, and she mentioned Grumpy Cat, and it's freaky. Like, that Beast is freaky. So they made Grumpy Cat Beast, White Queen, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Wolverine, and after reading a year of that story, and I'm like, oh my god, it's Grant Morrison. It's gonna be good. Yeah. And I'm like, but Grant Morrison is not my cup of tea. I say I have Morrison amnesia because every time I see his name on a book, I'm like, this is gonna be excellent. Yeah. And then I read it, and I'm just like,
in my years, I've learned that it's hit or miss.
It's hit or miss with Morrison. Yeah. Like, so after a year of reading this storyline of this character they introduced, Zorn, which had this weird metal face headplate. After a year of reading it, he takes off his helmet and he goes, ha ha ha, I'm Magneto. You've been working with me the entire time. And I thought, that's it? Yeah. That's it. And this is a free comic book day. At this time, Ryan and I had people at our table just to listen to us talk about 90s comic books. And I said, compare that to way back 1992, X-Men the Animated Series. First episode, the reason why Jubilee is being hunted down from Sentinels is because of a government program called the Mutant Registration Program, which was being doubled as a way to hunt mutants because people feared the mutants because they don't know what they're going to do with their powers. And and even Storm in that episode taught us people fear what they don't understand, and that fear can create hate. Yeah. So, in that episode, the X-Men have to go to the mutant registration facility to destroy the record. They put their life on the line in that episode so that no other mutant can be hunted down. And in that episode, Beast gets hit by a sentinel and zapped into the fence, and he gets held captive. And we're introduced to this character named Morph. And Morph, when you meet him, Morph's power is he can change his body to look like anybody. He's basically basically for listeners who don't know who Morph is, he's the male version of Mystique.
Yeah.
So what happened was they introduced Morph, and they show his relationship with everybody. Like he's the first episode, he's watching TV and he's changing his head to talk like the commercials.
He's the
comic relief character.
Yeah, he's like a jokey.
Yeah, exactly. So in that episode, Morph pushes Wolverine out of the way, and he's like, Wolverine pushes him, gets zapped, and they kill off Morph.
Yep.
We're 5 years old either 5 to 10 years old, watching the debut of this series. Beast is captured. Morph dies in the process because these mutants set out to make sure that no other mutant is hunted down by this mutant registration program. That was X-Men the Animated Series in 1992. 2000, Grant Morrison's like, you've been working with Magneto. And I'm like, you don't get that. And that's what so ultimately, after that free comic book day, Ryan and I stayed in contact, and we watch The Flash, we watch Arrow, but we talk about after every Tuesday The Flash ends, I know I'm going to get a text from Ryan, or he's going to get a text from me, and we're going to talk about The Flash and about the comics.
Usually a Easter egg or something that we're going to squeal about like little children.
And because they just debuted Jay Garrick onto the show, and we fanboyed out.
Oh yeah, in that episode when they run around the pillar, essentially creating the cover of The Flash of Two Worlds, and I screamed at my phone, and it translated it into a message and sent it to Phil, and then he just sent me back symbols like.
We knew what it was. You could at symbols, asterisks, parentheses, exclamation points.
It was incredible.
And so I'm like, you know what? We have people. We had an audience at Free Comic Book Day, and we always make ourselves laugh. I said, let's start this podcast, the Neon Nerds podcast, because if we can have people who listen to it, because there are more people like us out there. We like the mutants.
Oh yeah.
No, but there are others out there.
It's kind of like in the Flash TV show, how the particle accelerator exploded. There are other people out there that were at that moment, at the explosion of the 90s.
Yes.
In between all those comic books and all those cartoons, who have lived it, and people are like, yeah, the healing coma.
Yeah.
There are people out there.
So this is for everybody who loves the 90s and was afraid to say anything about it, because we grew up with the 90s, we love the 90s, and that's
still love the storylines.
Let me ask you, do you have a favorite 90s storyline or moment?
I mean, there's so many. For me, I guess it would be Nightfall. Because that, for me, my older brother was collecting them, and I remember reading them. Every issue of Batman, up until the point where he gets his back broken, what happens is Bane lets all the inmates out of Arkham, and every issue, he's going after somebody new. But reading them all at once, by the time you get to the Nightfall 499, Batman 499, I think is when he gets his back broken. No, it can't be, because 500 is when the new suit is introduced. Anyway, when he finally gets his back broken, up until that point, you can kind of feel how tired he's getting, and like how exhausted he is. They add more scruff to his face, and for me, it was like, wow, this is Batman. But is there any for you?
I, being the X-Men fan that I am, and the Gambit fan that I am, the 90s was X-Men and Batman were the two, and Spider-Man were the three main properties. But Spider-Man, the Clone Saga.
Can we talk about the Clone? You want to wait till the Clone Saga episode, or do you want?
We're gonna little tease for everyone out there. We're gonna introduce a storyline book club.
Yeah, so you might have noticed we're kind of dancing around this episode, not really focused. But that's because we're waiting.
Yeah, because we're doing a storyline book club where we're going to talk about 90s comics that people said they hate, which now they're going to look back on, which we all look back on and say, you know what? That was a good storyline. Well, one of those was the Clone Saga.
Well, it kind of came out of, because you had noticed that a lot of the storylines from the 90s that people hate, it's almost like they're redoing nowadays. Because the Clone Saga in the 90s, now we have the
Spider-Verse, exactly, with all the different, because the Clone Saga, there's a character by the name of the Jackal, which clones Spider-Man.
And that was actually earlier, 70s, because I have that reprint.
Yes, and what happens is the writers, I believe that was Howard Mackey, who wrote that storyline, and because he also debuted the 90s Ghost Rider Danny Ketch. Because if people don't know, a lot of the Ghost Rider you see today is the 90s Ghost Rider, but they give it to the 70s Johnny Blaze. Like for the chain, the fire chain, the pen and stare, and the leather jacket with the spikes, and that cool ass motorcycle which has that
big which has that front with the eyes,
which is like a very metallic kind of Metallica-esque type skull.
I actually had that toy too. There was a Ghost Rider
because there was a Ghost Rider cartoon.
I had that cycle.
For people who don't know, they gave to, which I think Danny Ketch is a stronger character than Johnny Blaze.
Yeah,
but now that's what they're kind of doing. They're kind of, the big story that Marvel just finished up is called the Spider-Verse, and they had the Edge of the Spider-Verse. But back then they had so Howard Mackey brought back this clone of Spider-Man named Ben Reilly, and and you don't know which one is the real Spider-Man. Now you're thinking, wait, it kind of played with you saying, wait a second, have I been reading
the clone
all this time? You mean Ben? You mean there's this guy named Ben Reilly who looks exactly like Spider-Man but just has blonde hair?
Yeah.
You mean this has been? So I've been, which now you're thinking that's because at the time I was enthralled because I wanted to know every week. I wanted to know which was the real Spider-Man. Was it Peter Parker? Was it? But the thing is, Ben Reilly being the clone of Peter, which you ultimately find out, you realize that he too had all Spider-Man's memories. So you think he had the real Uncle Ben. So you don't know which one had the real Uncle Ben, which one had the real Aunt May, because they have the same history. But Edge of the Spider-Verse, now they're going through every version of Spider-Man that was ever out there. And so I was thinking, what has made the thing that if you go to a regular comic enthusiast that was born prior to the late 80s, they will tell you that they hate the Clone Saga. They don't like Ben Reilly. They didn't like it. They're the same people who are buying Edge of the Spider-Verse, which has Ben Reilly back.
Oh, he's back.
Ben Reilly's one of the Spider-Men back in this one. Back in the 90s, they introduced the 2099 series of comics, which
great series. Spider-Man 2099. If you get your hands on it, read it. I think the reason that. You liked Ben Reilly, right?
Yes, I love Ben Reilly.
Yeah, I think the reason that we like Ben Reilly and we like Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, is because we're familiar with the character, but because Ben Reilly was introduced to us, Miguel O'Hara was introduced to us, so it's kind of like this is our Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. We don't have to go back and read about how he fought the Sinister Six. Yeah, we're getting his adventures, firsthand, and that's why I like 2099 because. For one, the costume is incredible. The costume is banging.
We were talking about this before we started recording, about the awesomeness that is the 2099 Spider-Man costume, where it doesn't have the eyes. Yeah. It has the markings. Brian was like, "It's got the markings on the mask," and we almost finished the sentence.
It's like an abstract, it hints at where the eye is. It's just so cool.
And it had the torn up. Because Spider-Man has the webbing, depending on because when Todd McFarlane drew, because originally when Spider-Man was created, it had the webbing between his arms by Steve Ditko, and then when Ditko got off the title, a lot of the artists were like, it's a pain in the ass to draw. and instead of making the costume black, which it originally was, they made it blue to make it more appealing and all that. Yeah. So, and then when Todd McFarlane took over back in the book in the late 80s, early 90s, which is the first time we ever saw Spider-Man. I don't know about you. The first time I ever saw Spider-Man was a Todd McFarlane Spider-Man.
Was it which one? Because
It wasn't a specific issue. It was actually the coloring book that I got. It was a Todd McFarlane style.
Insane.
So his legs are up in the air over his shoulder, and he's got the spaghetti webbing.
There's two covers where it's the same cover, same pose, but one's red and blue, one's black.
Yes.
And I had both of them, and I don't remember which is which, but I remember the one is the Lizard, the other one's Morbius.
Yes.
And both of them were like terrifying.
The good thing, the light bulb just went off on top of my head. One of the books we wanted to discuss is Torment, because that was from the Torment.
Is that the Lizard one?
That was the issue one is from the Lizard, and then because Todd McFarlane, Spider-Man got so big in the 90s, and because Todd McFarlane was the artist, I mean the stories were okay, but people were buying it for the Todd McFarlane artwork.
Yeah.
And because what happened was he brought back the web between the arms and the chest of Spider-Man. He brought that. Yeah. He made the eyes bigger than any artist has ever made Spider-Man's eyes, because normally they were small. He made it almost take up the entire mask. He introduced the spaghetti web. Now, if you pick up a Spider-Man comic, pick up a Spider-Man toy, the webbing that he has now was introduced when Ryan and I picked up Spider-Man, because that was what they call the spaghetti webbing, which looks like strands of spaghetti wrapped around each other. Like up until then, Spider-Man web was just lines with like crosses through it, so it basically looked like 2 lines with X's in between it.
Yeah, whenever I drew Spider-Man as a kid, I was drawing the spaghetti web and like not realize. I was just like, that's what it looks like.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
So with Spider-Man, Spider-Man got so big that Todd McFarlane said, I can write better stories than this. He's like, so Spider-Man. So he ultimately ended up doing his own Spider-Man series, which is called Torment, which brings it back to his first, which is why the Lizard is the first in there, and it's the storyline is so great because if I'm sure everyone who's listening to this is familiar with Tom McFarlane's artwork, but check his artwork out. He brings such a darkness and grittiness, but keeps that exaggerated comic book style that you can. But sometimes, because this goes back to what before we started recording, Ryan, Tom McFarlane created the character Spawn. Mm-hmm. So, Ryan, do you want to tell your story about the HBO cartoon that was based off of the Tom McFarlane?
Oh well, when I was in the 90s, Spawn was getting a live action movie, and there were toys everywhere, and there was toys for the comic book too, actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was one of them, and I was like, oh, Spawn's so cool. I never read a Spawn comic book, but I saw the toys, I liked the character. So at the video store one day, VHS tapes, I saw the Spawn cartoon, and I convinced my parents to rent it for me, because I was like, it's a cartoon, it's probably for kids. 5 minutes into this, it was like F-bombs dropped, there's all this gore, there's like naked chicks.
Prostitutes hanging out.
Yeah. So they immediately turned it off, so it wasn't for me. And I have yet to watch it again, but I want to.
But that's the mysticism of Todd McFarlane.
Yeah.
Is the fact that
it was it imprinted on me as a child.
And you're like, this is so neat. But you don't understand how dark so that's when he took over. So Torment, I think we should, for those who want to really look at the definitive Spider-Man artist, it's Todd McFarlane. And I think even people who don't like the 90s will tell you that Todd McFarlane is the greatest Spider-Man artist, just because if Stan Lee could have written Spider-Man and Todd McFarlane could have drawn it, then you would have seen because Stan Lee created Spider-Man. To me, what Stan Lee wrote in Spider-Man, Todd McFarlane drew in Spider-Man, and that's why it's so revered. And that's another thing we grew up with was Spider-Man Torment, which we should put in the pipeline for the Storyline Book Club.
Yeah,
I think
there's a few we have to put in there.
Yeah, but all right, so 90s. But not my favorite 90s moment. Just to wrap this one up, is Extinction Agenda, written by Chris Claremont, art by Jim Lee. It's the first mission of you guys are gonna get if you love the 90s and you too love Gambit, but. Gambit was his first team mission with the X-Men was Extinction Agenda, because Storm was de-aged and Storm is de-aged, and that's when they introduced Gambit. Was he saved her because he was stealing? Gambit's a thief, and he was stealing a painting in his first issue, and then he basically was protecting Storm, and Storm was like, "Listen, I live with these people," so Gambit takes Storm back to the X-Men, and then ultimately Storm gets re-aged. You know, she gets back to her grown self, and she tells, Gambit, you should join the team, right? And he sees like the X-Men. His first thing is looking at the X-Men, and he's like, this Wolverine guy, he beats Wolverine in the Danger Room, and then he's like, all right, I'm out of here, see ya. And she's like, no, you gotta go. And he's like, I liked you better when you were when you were de-aged, because you were kick-ass and you had your own thing. So none of the X-Men. So when he's about to leave, he hears that the X-Men have been captured, and there's like the offshoot of team, which is led by Cable. He's like, don't you care? He's like, no. And then he's like, well, Storm's in there, and that's when Gambit's like, all right, let me go save this. So none of the X-Men like Gambit. He beats down Wolverine. Jubilee gets scarred because the first time she's like, this Gambit guy, and before Jubilee grows to like Gambit, because she was like Wolverine's sidekick. Oh no, right? So Gambit's like, so then they don't like him in there. And the way he sees it, he sees them all. And Cameron Hodge is the scariest looking X-Men villain of all time. He's just this head. He's this head on this giant body, and his like jaw almost gets like detached from it, and like his eye sticks out. He's like, if you want to see a '90s villain, check out Cameron Hodge. But that during that storyline, no one likes Gambit and everything. He pushes Cable out of Cameron Hodge attack and gets a shard in his leg. And what he does is, while held up, he's in because he knows they're all going to get captured no matter what, and they need the rest of the X-Men in order to save this. He's caught up, and he has the spike in his leg, and he lifts his legs up, and he bites he uses his teeth to pick out the spike, and he unlocks the handcuffs, and he frees the X-Men. And that's my favorite '90s moment storyline I picked up. Are you looking up Cameron Hodge?
Yeah, I had to look up Cameron Hodge.
This knowledge goes that deep.
Yeah, that's deep.
But do you remember your first comic book?
Yeah, I do. I don't know about your school, because I was in Philly. But did you ever get those? So it was like you get those pamphlets, and you would order books from them.
Yes, the Scholastic
yes.
book charts. Yeah.
All right, so there was one. It was like order you did assortment of comic books. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I ordered it, and I actually got a Batman comic, and I lost it over the years, but I actually just rebought it. I found it again, and it's an obscure issue. Mm. It's actually more about Catwoman and Vicky Vale and another woman, right? The cover is like the three of them with Batman in the background.
So like back then, Little Ron was like, Batman's a pimp.
He was. The main storyline was them, and then Batman was like doing something. But like I thought I was so cool because I finally had my own Batman comic. So that was the first one, because I didn't have any money when I was younger, so it was really just reading my older brother's comics, because they were the only ones that collected. So for me to have my own, I was like, yeah. And then I would start buying them at the dollar store. Mm-hmm. You get like 3 for $1.
Oh yeah, that's right. So they still do. Yeah. They still have, and a lot of the '90s comics are in there. Someone on eBay. Yeah. Someone they had Uncanny X-Men 266, their first appearance, which is $100 issue, by the way. In the dollar store $3 pack. But yeah.
Yeah, I used to get. I had like a lot of Valiants. Remember them?
Oh, Valiant! They're coming back. They just re-imprinted
Yeah, I had a lot of Valiants, and I was afraid because they use like bad language. They use like fuck words in there, and I was afraid of my parents finding them and like, hey, what are you doing with these vulgar comics? Because comics were already getting a bad name with my Skull character, so I was afraid they were gonna. I used to keep them in an empty cereal box.
Really?
Yeah.
See, going back to my experience, my dad collected comic books, as I said before, at the point. So Captain America had so my brother was all about Captain America. Right? So my sister never got into comic books,
right?
So, but she liked playing that game too. So we all played, ended up playing the Captain America and the Avengers game, and the one character in there who was the weirdest of all looking characters. They had Captain America, Iron Man, Hawkeye, and Vision. And Vision was in this all gigantic. He was just white.
Yeah.
With this white cape. No other colors on him, but just white. Right. And I was like, well, who's this guy? I'm going to be this guy. And whenever the narrator was on there, he was like, he had the best, like, but he went out of his way for Captain, no, none of us could be Captain America because Pat was always Captain America.
Yeah.
And Jen would be Hawkeye. Right, but before I even played, I didn't want Hawkeye. No. I just never got into Hawkeye, and my dad was Iron Man, so I'm like, I'll be this giant white guy. And when you picked it, it's like Vision, and they're like, oh man, there's something about this. So because we played that game, my dad, the very first comic book I got, my dad stopped at a comic book store on the way home, and he got me, it's Avengers number 360. It's the start of the alternate Visions storyline, and it's a gold holofoil cover.
Yeah.
And if anything speaks 90s comics, it's holofoil covers.
Oh yes.
Because it was gold and it had Vision on the front. Because he just knew that I liked that's why I played in that game.
Yeah.
He couldn't tell what X-Men books had. You know, he was just like, this looks neat.
Yeah.
So he got me the Avengers 360 alternate Visions, the very last appearance of that. And so I have a special place in my heart because that is the very last appearance of the all-white costume Vision. Because it's out the storyline where the bad Vision from the 1940s was like, he switched bodies with Vision. So he put his mind in the white body and put Vision's mind in the green and yellow. When Vision debuted, he was in green and yellow.
Yeah.
But he put him in like this different looking version of it, which the bad Vision was in. So that was the last appearance of Vision in the white costume.
Yeah.
So that was my first comic book. See, I never had to hide comics or anything because my dad was like, my dad found, because I'm a twin, my sister's a year younger. Like my mom was like, comic books. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. I love my mom.
Yeah.
And she was all supportive of everything. Like, she would take me to Toys R Us to get, because I called up every day for the Gambit figure. My mom took me Batman Forever when Robin was out. I had to get all the Robin figures, and my mom took me there. But comic books, we were too young. We were too long. My mom was like, maybe when they're older you can start collecting, but little ones here and there never hurt. Like, we never. And my dad had the long white boxes of comics, so I never had to hide them. I never had to do anything. My dad found it at least as an excuse to go to a comic book store.
Yeah.
Sort of that little like, well, Patty, the boys like comic books. No. But yeah, so 90s comics. If you want a place to talk about them, listen about them, and just enjoy and this podcast isn't for like, our specialty is 90s comics.
Right? But it's going to get into all areas.
It's going to get into all areas. I mean, just because we're comic creators, our forte isn't it? But we also,
comics is our way in. But we're going to explore the decade.
Yeah. I mean, the reason for the name of the podcast is Neon Nerds, which we're two nerds, and everything was neon in the 90s. Do you remember Marvel Comics? They had like the M and then the comics, like in the classic neon thing, like above the M. And there was also the candy, the Neon Nerds candy.
Yeah, so Neon Nerds was out.
Yeah. So So yeah, that's 90s comics, 90s everything to a T.
Well, what do you for our storyline, book line for the next episode? I guess what books do you want to get into? What do you want to discuss?
Oh,
I have a handful that I'm like reeling to discuss, but I don't.
Which ones? Yeah.
Definite ones I want to get into is definitely the Clone Saga, just because I want to talk about Ben Reilly, Scarlet Spider.
Yes.
Nightfall. Because it's like a series. Oh, Superman, Reign of Superman.
I love Nightfall because it was when Bane broke. Yeah. This is a good way for non-readers of the 90s comic books to kind of get introduced to Bane, like the movie, the Dark Knight Rises. Bane, where he breaks Batman's back. This is that storyline.
There's no magic rope.
There is no magic knee brace. There's only a psychopath by the name of John Paul Valley, who takes over as Batman.
But similar to the Clone Saga / multiverse, they're doing the same thing. Where they've effectively killed off Batman and replaced him with Jim Gordon in a robot suit.
In a metal suit.
Yeah, robot
sound familiar, people, for haters of Azrael out there? Scott Snyder's writing a book.
It's the same scenario.
Same exact storyline. It's just not... And Azrael was... What was good about that was... I think it was Chuck Dixon and Denny O'Neil.
Yeah.
They didn't introduce him to be the new Batman. That was never the never thing, because it was sort of a coming of age story. It's a perfect story of Batman, of Bruce Wayne getting older, getting fatigued. Because right before that was, a couple years prior, was Frank Miller, The Dark Knight, which introduced the old Batman. But this was also a coming of age story of Dick Grayson.
Right.
Because for a time he realizes that whenever Bruce Wayne goes down and whenever he can no longer be Batman, there always has to be a Batman.
Right.
And Dick Grayson's like, I need to be Batman. So that's the first time Dick Grayson ever becomes Batman, is because he sees what the wrong hands of being Batman in the wrong hands can get ugly, and so they were setting up a future sort of threat in Azrael, and then his popularity grew, and they brought him into his own series, and he had his own, which they introduced. So I think Nightfall is, because before even before the current Batman storyline, they had
Batman Rest in Peace.
Another
Morrison car wreck.
In which, you guessed it.
Batman.
Oh my God! I just realized. Did you read that one? Did you read our Batman and Robin arc? And that was written by Morrison and by Frank Quitely was the artist on it.
Yeah.
Do you know the big reveal at the end is they had to work with the Joker?
Yeah.
He took the X-Men.
Oh no!
He just took the.
He zormed him. Yeah, he's like that. He's got that. He's that doctor guy.
He's the doctor guy with the mask. Oh my God!
Well, we just solved it right here on Neon Nerds.
Neon Nerds. Grant Morrison just.
I want Morrison to write like a Superman storyline where like a new Kryptonian comes and it's just Doomsday with a mustache, and then he takes it up like, "You've been working with me, Doomsday." He twirls it.
What?
Yeah. You know what the thing I hated most about Batman Rest in Peace was that it ends with I won't get into all of it, but it ends with an explosion, a helicopter explosion, and they don't find Batman. And you're like, oh, is he dead? Is he not? But he doesn't die in Rest in Peace, because then he goes to Final Crisis and dies by Darkseid. And I'm like, well, there's a gap there.
There's like... That was was that Final Crisis? Yeah, that was Final Crisis.
Yeah, that was Final Crisis. He wrote that too, didn't he?
No. I think Jeff Johns write?
I don't know, because I didn't like it, so it makes me think Morrison did it. It makes me think Morrison did it.
Jeff Johns.
Shout out! He's great.
He's great. So we're gonna hope that it's not Jeff Johns.
No, I'm pretty sure it's Morrison.
Oh no, we have cell phones in front of us.
But and then him, Batman and Cat experienced the same. They both die, but not really. They got shot with time bullets.
Like, what? And both and they reintroduced Jason Todd. And Bucky Barnes. They both came back during that, which is funny because at conventions, one of my two best-selling prints. Three best-selling prints. One is Deadpool. Because Deadpool, New Mutants '98 in the '90s. Deadpool was introduced, and we were introduced to Assassin Deadpool. We were. Who was a little who was crazy. He was a crazed assassin.
He was still a merc with a mouth.
He was a merc with a mouth, but he's not the Deadpool that's like, knock knock guys, I'm in a comic, haha.
Yeah, not he was like breaking. It was like Assassin Spidey kind of.
Yeah, which was good. The Red Hood is my second best. So, and Gambit is my third one. But Red Hood with Jason Todd, and I get a lot of people go, I often think Red Hood would be a perfect '90s character, and they see my artwork, they're like, this is a '90s style. Let me pick up a Red Hood. But it's funny to see how at the time, when they brought back Batman, when they brought back the Red Hood and Jason and Batman, because originally it was in Hush and they said it was Clayface. But his popularity was kind of like, hey, we got something here with people liking Jason Todd again. Let's bring him back, and they bring him back, and the same time Bucky Barnes was brought back as the Winter Soldier, and Steve Epting and Ed Brubaker, they crushed that series. Like I'm drawing a blank on. I don't even remember who wrote the reintroduction to the Red Hood. I just remember that Matt Wagner.
I think that was Winnick.
Well, Judd Winnick. Yeah, that's right. Judd Winnick wrote it back, and it just shows you. Like, if you look at today, the Red Hood is Winter Soldier had a movie, but if you walk into an FYE, you see Red Hood logo shirts. You see Red Hood and the Outlaws is one of DC's best selling titles, and Winter Soldier has been constantly given to different writers different creative teams because they don't know what to do with them. And Red Hood, and so I think it's funny just to see that Red Hood kind of, but
he took off.
Bucky,
he should have stayed dead. That's just my feeling.
There was one good thing about that was the Baron Zemo. Did you read the arc where when Cap's dead, Bucky takes over? They had Fallen Sun miniseries where they had different people try to be. You want to talk about ripping off another '90s thing? When Superman was quote unquote dead, they had different people try to step in the mantle of Superman. People hated it. Right. Now we're talking 20 years later. They had Fallen Sun Captain America, which Captain America is quote-unquote dead. And they have Sam Wilson trying to step in. They had Hawkeye try to step in. Punisher try to step in. And they had Ed Brubaker, and finally said, well, you know what? Only one man can be Captain America, and it has to be Bucky. Right. And so you're like, this kind of sounds awfully familiar. But essentially, Bucky Cap had a good couple arcs before they realized it was time to bring back Steve Rogers. And when they ultimately did, he was Captain Steve Rogers because Brubaker Bucky Cap was kind of he was the hit. He was everywhere. And they brought back Baron Zemo. You should check it out. Baron Zemo is he's the anti-villain. If we have anti-heroes, he's more bad than good. But his bad, he's the son of the original Baron Zemo, who he watched Cap kill. He watched Cap, the second Baron Zemo, Baron Helmut Zemo, sees his father get killed by Captain America. So Baron Zemo hates Captain America because he doesn't know that his father was a Nazi scientist, right? All he sees is he sees his father was a great husband, a great father, a great scientist. He created Adhesive X, right? So that's all he sees. That's all he sees, and he sees his dad murdered by Captain America, so he goes after Captain America. And in the comics, Baron Zemo is the one who blows up the missile He's the one that has the missile that kills Bucky.
Oh, right.
So it's kind of a coming of age story at the second time, because now you have Bucky, who's always like the sidekick of Cap. You see, so Baron Zemo's like, that's not Captain America. Like because Baron Zemo was kind of in hiatus because he was with the Thunderbolts, which is a good guy, and this was kind of bringing back Zemo as a bad guy. He sees Captain America on screen. He's like, I fought in Captain America for years, and that ain't Steve Rogers. And he sees it, and he says, oh my god, that's Bucky Barnes. The only good thing, the number one thing my dad did, if I could take any solace of, Baron Zemo was kind of shit on by all the other Cap villains, but none of those villains could say that they killed Bucky. You know, they got the Captain America's heart. So he sees Bucky back, and he's like, son of a bitch. Right. So he goes back in and he fights Bucky Cap. Right. Yeah. And Zemo kicks his ass. Zemo kicks Bucky Cap's ass because he's like, you're not Captain America, and I'm here to tell you. He's like, I'm not here to kill you. I'm here for you to suffer the fate of being alive, right? Because in the comics, Winter Soldier Bucky didn't die. His arm was blown off. Yeah. So they took Bucky. The Russians took Bucky out of the water, gave him a mechanical arm, and they would freeze him, defreeze him, have him do Black Ops missions, freeze him. So Baron Zemo said, you couldn't stay dead, and I'm going to make you regret not staying dead for my father. You want to cheat death? You want to cheat my father's death? I'm going to make you hate being alive. So he released to the world that Captain America was not Steve Rogers.
Oh yeah,
it was Bucky Barnes.
And he did all those Black Ops missions.
And he was part of the JFK assassination, part of all this, and you're like. So the people turned on Captain America.
Yeah, and the trial of Bucky Cap.
Yeah, and Zemo just was like, out of here. I was like, but that was one of the, because it takes a lot to impress me to me the 90s comics set the bar on how extreme you can get.
Yeah.
And how, because I swear to you, if in the 90s, if they brought back Bucky Barnes and they said, oh, his arm blew off and he was with a mechanical arm, people would have shit all over it.
Yeah.
They would have said, he's a Cable ripoff, right? Yeah. And because Cable's like, do you ever notice Cable's kind of that okay character? Most of his damage was done in the 90s, right? I think it was created in '89 by Rob Liefeld. Yeah. What do you think about Rob Liefeld? Quick side note.
Not a huge Liefeld fan.
I appreciate Liefeld. He was to me was extreme.
Oh yeah.
To the max.
Yeah, to the max is for sure.
And I appreciate. Is he my cup of tea? I'm more of a Jim Lee McFarlane guy, right? Yeah. And Rob Liefeld was kind of like, I gotta be more extreme than those guys. But I appreciate that he created Deadpool. I appreciate that he created Cable. Right. Because Cable, through Crunch and Munch.
Yeah. You came to love Cable?
I came to love Cable.
It's like Stockholm Syndrome.
It's like, Cable.
I do like Cable.
Yeah, but they would have shit all over.
Yeah.
That they would have shit all over that. It would have been like, you can't bring back Bucky, 90s ploy, and so it's funny just to see how much that some of the things that they get away with, and some writers and artists, not to say they get away with.
Yeah, but people are okay with it.
People are okay, and I think you should thank the 90s comic series for being okay with some of these things.
Oh yeah.
Because up until this point, the 90s set the stage for, you can't get any more extreme than that period of time. We had replacements.
Now you have to back it down, it seems like.
Yeah, now
even the artwork's more toned down. Nobody's really like, busting out of their costume anymore. And I think it's kind of sucks. I think because I mean, the '90s Cable is Cable. Yeah. And the today Cable, he doesn't have nearly enough shoulder pads.
He looks scrawny.
Yeah, he looks like a little guy. He looks like, can we get some more pouches on him?
He gets younger and younger.
Yeah, like, he does.
Cable is the old guy.
Yeah.
Like, he has white hair. It's not like Magneto, Quicksilver, stylish white hair. He has white hair because he's old and he's from the future. Right. And that's what... And so he had shoulder pads, the gigantic guns, and the mechanical arm, right? Because he has the legacy virus and he uses his powers to constantly fight it. Yeah. Which is another thing you can thank 90s comic books for that. For that kind of, oh no, I've been infected, so I can't be. Heroes were getting so powerful that they had to give reasons why they weren't as powerful as other characters. And one of Cable's reason was he has the legacy virus in him, and that's sort of the reason why he comes back from the future to the past to stop Apocalypse and everything, and to stop that virus. So he's constantly using his powers to fight off that virus, and that's why it's contained to the mechanical arm that he has. And like Gambit was so popular, and they're like, well, he's not as powerful because he went to Minister Sinister, and he had to do surgery on his brain to reduce his power level. So it got to the point where some characters were getting so powerful when they weren't as powerful, they had to have a reason.
That's like when they ripped Wolverine's skeleton out, and then he had just bone claws.
That when was that? That was like in the 2000s, right?
Was it? I thought it was earlier.
Was it earlier?
I thought it was like 90s.
90s.
Because I remember he got his skull ripped out.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And then he was Berserker Wolverine. He didn't have a nose.
Oh, he just had
the bandana.
The bandana around.
Because your nose is a bone, but it didn't make any sense. It's like it's just cartilage, right, guys?
Yeah. Age of Apocalypse is another good 90s storyline. There's
so many. We're at like the hour and 40 minutes.
Oh yeah, right? Okay, yeah. So,
but that's just how it is. We just want to dive right in and just get to everything. Like I'm still dying to talk about Ben Reilly.
Okay, so next week, if you can, if listeners want to listen to this, because we'll give some time. We're going to discuss the Clone Saga, so if you want to do some research up on the Clone Saga or even read the Clone Saga, go check it out. Go to a local comic book store. I'm sure it's in the dollar bin or the for $1.
Don't ask any comic book nerds about the Clone Saga. You'll just get rage.
You got to do it 90s style. You got to take the Brady cereal box. And you gotta put the comics in there, and you gotta hide away from them.
Yeah. So, and when you look up Scarlet Spider, make sure it's the 90s with the blue hoodie, not the current Scarlet Spider.
Which is from the 90s. Who was the third clone?
Yeah, it's Kane.
It's Kane.
Yeah.
Yeah. See?
I do like his outfit.
Oh. Something about that red and black.
Yeah.
But we'll get on to that. we'll get on to that next.
We're gonna Spider-Man out next episode.
Yeah, we are. So yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed this. Enjoyed our little talks. I'm sure we'll get into more of these. We kind of went off on we started with action figures, went to cartoons, and brought it back into comics. So if you grew up in the 90s or even want to experience the 90s, stay tuned for more Neon Nerds.
Yeah.
So we don't have a sign off yet, but we want to go with Stan Lee.
What do you want to do?
You want to go Excelsior?
Oh, I know we're going to like...
Oh, so Stan Lee for Neon Nerds here saying Excelsior.
And I'll teach you how to draw those characters, Jack.
I'm Phil McNulty.
I'm Ryan Brady.
So long.
Neon Nerds out.